Y'all, and thank you for taking the time to join us today. I will first address some logistical issues for the session and then introduce our speaker, Forrest Breyfogle. A lot of material is planned for this one-hour webinar, so the audio will be muted for the remainder of the session to ensure that we are able to get through the entire presentation in the time allowed. We will not be able to hear you, but you will be able to hear Forrest. Do not let this stop you from sending to us text questions through the system during the presentation. If Forrest cannot answer your question either during or at the end of the webinar, we will either email you or call you with a response. There will also be a recording of the webinar available on our website within 48 hours. You will receive an email with a link to the recording. I will now introduce our presenter, Forrest Breyfogle. Forrest is the CEO and President of Smarter Solutions. He is a professional engineer and ASQ Fellow. Forrest was recently presented with the Leadership Award at the Lean and Six Sigma World Conference in San Diego, California. He was named Quality Professional of the Year for 2011 by Quality Magazine. He received the Crosby Medal from the ASQ in 2004 for an earlier book, Implementing Six Sigma 2nd Edition. Forrest currently lives in Austin, Texas, where he founded Smarter Solutions in 1992. Again, thank you for joining us today. At this time, I will turn the presentation over to Forrest.
Hello. We're going to be covering a lot of ground today. So some of the questions that we asked you for when you signed up were rather interesting. We had things like we're just getting started. Also, maybe getting management buy-in to any new concepts can be somewhat of a challenge. So I'd like you to think about what you have in mind as a major question, and we can make sure we address that during this session. So the learning objectives that we have for this afternoon is we want to look at some of the issues with our current process improvement efforts. Sometimes it seems like we do things, but really, is there some other better way of doing it? We're going to be talking about that. We're next going to be looking at some predictive scorecards. So why am I looking at that with process improvement efforts? Well, I would like to create a little different system where our scorecard needs or improvement needs actually pool for the creation of projects. And we're going to be getting into that. Then we want to talk about how does this all come together? How do we make an overall business management system of the concepts we're going to be talking about? So let's jump right on in. If we stop to think about improvement project selection, if we're looking at Lean Six Sigma, often we select projects from a list of projects that executives or other people think that we ought to undertake. And we tend to rank those projects and decide which ones we're going to work on. I tend to look at that as a somewhat of a push for project creation system within an overall organization. You know, that's building upon the concepts of Lean, where we want to have a pull system versus a push system. So we really would rather have a pull system, and we're going to be getting into that a little bit later. But a lot of times those projects that we're working on don't really benefit the enterprise as a whole. So what do we need to do differently? Well, I'm suggesting we really need to integrate these overall improvement methodologies, or where we're actually going to be focusing our efforts on, with our scorecard system. However, often the people in the north wing of the building are working on process improvement scorecards, and scorecards, and the people in the south wing of the building are working on improvement efforts. And then guess what? They don't talk to each other. So to me, that's a real issue. What we really like to do is get everybody together so that they have within the overall organization the 3 R's of business, or at least move towards that. That's everybody doing the right things, doing them right at the right time. Now, a means to accomplish that is what I call Integrated Enterprise Excellence, or IEE. Got a question for you here. Often organizations have red, yellow, green scorecards. Does yours? I'd like you to give me a response, yes, no, or you're unsure. Okay, we got just a 5 more seconds here and we'll close the poll down. Okay, looks like we have a pretty even split between the yes and no's, 45% roughly between them, and then 10% is not unsure. Okay, well that's super. Appreciate your feedback on that, because we're going to be getting into stoplight scorecards here, and we'll describe a way to actually measure the organizations, whether you're doing that or not. So if we look at how organizations traditionally provide performance metrics, often what we'll have is a tabular form of reporting. So if we were looking at this line in particular here, if somebody were doing this report out, what might get said? Well, somebody might say, in 2002, we planned for annexations, but they did not occur as quickly as we thought. Therefore, our cost per call was up. 2003, we had more annexations, so therefore our calls per down is down. What invariably you get when somebody presents information like this? We get stories. People are talking about the ups and downs that we might have in this particular table. Now notice how this is laid out annually. What happens if there was a change, a significant change in June? Would we know it? Well, not really, because we would be kind of averaging two different processes. So with tabular reporting, we're not looking at the organization as a process, just a number. Another way we might look at it is through bar charts. I venture to say most of you have seen bar charts in one form or fashion in a presentation. What are we going to look at? Well, we'll probably look at the latest time period and see which particular bar is the largest and react to that. But is that the way to do it? Another approach is the balanced scorecard. Notice how the balanced scorecard leads from vision and strategy. But you know, I've noticed that strategies are often worded like, I want to be the best of the best. Well, how is everybody going to line up all their measures to statements like that? And then cascade that throughout the organization. So I'm suggesting there may be some issues with that approach too. Now another approach is red, yellow, green scorecards. Whenever red is an indication, that means whoever owns that particular metric needs to work on it. If it's green, especially if it changed from red, let's bring out the champagne because we made an improvement. But is that the right way of approaching it also? If we start looking at how typical metrics are reported, they're often reported as fiscal year statements. They're unrelated to improvement systems, and often they're point-to-point comparison. We compare what happened this month or this quarter to a previous quarter or maybe another year. However, what we really have is a relationship as y as a function of x. That is, the output is a function of the inputs to the process and the process steps itself. So if we don't like the y value here, we need to change either the x's or the process itself. Now you know what it's called when we manage to the y? That's called management by hope. And what we don't want to do is have management by hope. So what would we like to have? Well, we'd like to have effective metrics. So what they do is view the enterprise as a system of processes. Also what we want to do within our report out of the metrics include the effective variability. Because we can be reacting to all the ups and downs, but is that really the right thing to do? Does that really lead to the best behavior? Does that lead to the 3 R's of business? And then what we want to do is have a linkage to process improvement. For those metrics that need to be improved relative to the big picture. So let's go in and examine an actual red, yellow, green scorecard. I didn't fabricate this one. This is what customers ours say that we could use. Now, management really likes this form of reporting because it's rather easy. All they got to do is look at the last period of time, scan down the table, notice which colors are red, and then get that person who's ever responsible for that particular metric to work on it. However, is that the right way to manage a business? Or is that the best way of managing a business? Well, let's talk about one of the particular metrics that we have up there, which is finance metric B. If we notice it, we'll have 33% red and 50% green. Now the question is that common cause variability or special cause? Let's talk about the difference between common and special cause. And I'll use an illustration to describe how I view those particular techniques that were coined by Edwards Deming. Let's consider a commute from home to work process. And we're going to go by automobile. Now the question I might ask is, it going to take you the same amount of time to the second every day? Oh no, obviously. Why? Well, we can have more delays one day than the other from traffic signals, or maybe how fast we drove, or traffic conditions. So let's consider it typically takes us 25 to 35 minutes. We consider that to be common cause variability. Now, if it took us an hour one day, we can talk about that particular point. Maybe there was inclement weather, or we had a major traffic accident. But we really have no right to talk about the ups and downs between 25 and 35 minutes at individual points. But let's say we want to reduce the amount of time it takes us to commute. So we want to always be less than 33 minutes. So our natural inclination is to say, if it's 34 minutes, we're going to try to understand what went wrong. If it's 32 minutes, we're going to say, well, it's okay, it met our goal. But we just said that that's not the best way of doing it, because 25 to 35 minutes is common cause variability. But that's exactly what happens with red, yellow, green scorecards within an organization. We can be reacting as common cause variability, and so it's special cause. And we don't want to do that. Because if we got common cause variability and we don't like the answer, we need to change our process. So let's consider we decided to change our process to see if leaving the house a half an hour earlier made a difference. And sure enough, now the time it takes us to commute between 18 to 22 minutes. So not only the average value reduced, but also the variability reduced as well. So let's consider how we might go in and use that concept when we go in and present information within the organization. So we're going to take that same set of data that we had and we're going to look at it a little differently. Because we believe that we can get into a lot of firefighting mode. Whenever we see a red signal and compare it to green, say, well, what happened? But let's try to look at things a little differently. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an individual's control chart. Now people will say, well, that's the manufacturing stuff. This is old stuff. And especially if we got transactional, we just don't really apply that. Well, I won't necessarily disagree with you, but this is a little different approach. This is what I call 30,000-foot level charting. So in 30,000-foot level charting, we use individuals' control charts. And we want to see if we got common or special cause variability. So with this particular chart, the two horizontal lines that we have, the upper control limit and the lower control limit, are calculated by the variability between the subgroups. So if you got larger variability between the subgroups, that's between the various observations here, then we're going to have wider control limits. So if we plot our data now and we don't see any trend relative to the upper and lower control limit, we can say our process is in control. Now I like to use another term. I like to say, is it stable? It is stable. Now, and so in this case, what we notice is our process is stable. So what does that mean? Well, we thought we made an improvement moving from these two different points. But this chart shows that we didn't make a difference. It's in statistical control. So this is not unlike the variability we had between 25 and 35 minutes in our illustration. Now, if you've got a process that's stable and there's a recent region of stability, now that recent region of stability may be 3 weeks, 3 months, or 3 years, we can say our process is predictable. Now, isn't that exciting? Because the other charts that we had talked about didn't mention anything about predictability. The next obvious question is, what do you predict? So what we're going to do now is consider the data from the recent region of stability as a random sample of the future. So we're going to go in and create this histogram. So that represents a distribution of not only the region where we observed it, but also the future, unless something changed, either from the positive or the negative. So I'm going to turn that distribution on its side. I'm then going to draw the 2.2 value in. Now, where did that come from? Well, that was the trigger for the red. So if it was less than 2.2, it triggered a red signal. Now, the area under that curve represents the percentage of time that we expect it to be less than 2.2 or not meet our criteria. Figuring out that area on that distribution at the top, figuring out this area here, can be somewhat difficult. So a better way of doing it is a probability plot. Now you notice on the probability plot, the x-axis is the same as that for the histogram, or the probability density function. This value here represents percent less than. So if we come up with a 2.2 value, that's our criteria. So if we come at 2.2 and over, it's 32.6%. So that area represents, so that value represents the area of the curve left at 2.2. So we basically conclude about 32.6% is below 2.2. Now let's look at how we could present it to other people and throughout our organization. Now we can do this for one particular situation that's continuous data, or we can look at throughout the organization. And we're going to talk about how we can do this throughout the organization a little bit later. So right now what we have is we're going to present it as two charts. First to see if it's stable, and then the region of stability at the end, if there is one. We can take that data and do a probability plot. Notice how this form of presentation is consistent with Deming. What he talked about, Edward Deming, who turned the Japanese around in the 50s, he talked about the importance of considering variability. Now the way I like to present it is in terms that everybody understands. We've got a predictable process with about a 32.6% nonconformance. So everybody can understand that. So it's written in very easy terms. And also you get a visual about the variability and how long it's been stable. When I was doing this form of reporting in South American Mining Company, it just completely changed the behaviors of people in the organization. Instead of looking at the data just today or this week, we start looking at it as a process whenever you start examining data like this. Now the question is, how do you go in and put this together as part of an overall business system? Because metrics by themselves really don't improve anything. It just describes how the organization is performing. So what we put together here is part of this Integrated Enterprise Excellence System, a 9-step process. Now the first step is to describe the vision and mission. So if you're a hospital, you don't build bridges. So pretty much it's going to maintain continuity over time. And that continuity is also going to be described in step 2, which is the value chain. And that's going to include the satellite, that's the financial metrics, and 30,000 foot level metric, that's the operational metrics. They're going to be presented in a similar form that we just talked about. So this describes what you do and how you measure what you do. If you recall, earlier I said that the north wing of the building was working on scorecards and the south wing of the building worked on process improvement. They don't talk. Well, right now, through the value chain, we're going to pull those together. Then what we want to do is analyze the enterprise as a whole. Because what we want to lead to is metrics that we believe are important to actually improve so that the organization as a whole benefits. Then what we want to do is create SMART at specific, measurable, actionable, relevant, and time-based satellite level metric goals. Those are the financials. So if, for example, our organizations run on 10% profit margins and our competitors are 12%, then it would be a reasonable goal to say if we want to have our average profit margin by month to be 10 to 12% in maybe 9 months. Then I'm going to talk about creating strategies. Okay, so notice how now strategies are aligned to the financials. So if, for example, we want to improve the profit margins, one of the things we might look at is building a strategy that's built around reduction of defective rates. So we want to get strategies worded that you get your arms around. Now most strategies, or a lot of strategies it seems to me, are worded like vision statements. I want to be the best of the best. So this is not just in complete contrast to what you might be doing already, but it's just a little bit different. I want to lead to more targeted strategies. Then I want to lead to high potential areas to improve on. And then create SMARTs, 30,000 foot level metric goals that are tied to those. So I was working in, or I was giving a keynote at a major defense contractor, and the general manager described how they were using lean. And I said, well, okay, that's great. I'm touring your facility. I toured it. I said, well, you're doing a great job in lean. However, notice that you got a lot of equipment, equipment. You know, what projects you do sales and marketing. So they weren't doing anything. Well, that's what your bottleneck is. So you need to look at the big picture to figure out where you focus your efforts. So we want to get high potential areas to work on. Then what we want to do is identify and execute projects. If we did a good job, then what we've done is we've improved in the value chain our procedures, which impact the 30,000 foot level metric, which improved our satellite metric goals. See how it's all good alignment. We did a good job on that one, assessing how well we did. Then we want to maintain the gain. Notice how that loops back here to step number 3, not step number 1. So again, if we did a good job here, change the procedures here, which affect our 30,000 foot level, which affect our satellite. So this is like a Deming's plan, do, check, act. His system for improvement throughout the organization. Okay, so I'm going to next describe the application of these techniques within a hospital. Okay, oops, try another one here. Okay, So this is pulling from our software here, because we got a system here for that we're going to look at. Now we click on this. And what I have right here is the value chain. That's step number 2 in the overall 9-step process for the hospital. The top row, where we got the arrows between them, describes the primary flow of what we actually do as part of the business. Then you'll have some other functions such as IT, housekeeping, food service, patient, transportation, indicated separately. So what we're going to do now, and this is all clickable, it's in HTML, we'll click on Report Financials. Now if you notice on the right-hand side, I got the process. That's the process for reporting financials. And then on the left-hand side, I'm looking at how I'm going to measure the financials. I'm going to look at that from quality, cost, and time. Now the 2 metrics that I'm showing here is total revenue and profit margin. So I'm going to click on profit margin. Again, I'm pulling from our server here. If I were doing this in another part of the world, I could use an iPad. I could be using basically, if I have an internet connection, I can get access to this. And typically what happens is the server, our software would go out and pull the data from spreadsheets, SQL databases, ERP systems, or wherever, and update it maybe daily. This is not a real-time, per se, technically a second-by-second way of reporting, but it is real-time in that you get the reports out that are accurate every day, and everybody has access. So whenever meetings, I've noticed, are conducted using this approach, it really changes the dynamics of how people are looking at information. They don't react to just all the ups and downs, but they look at it as an overall system, which is really positive. So we're looking at now profit margins. So we're tracking it over time. That's on this control chart over here. You can see how it's got up and down, but it moved downward. Okay, well that's not good, but it's stable now. So I'm taking those 6 data points, creating a probability plot. Well, in this particular kind, I don't have a specification. You know, I may have a goal for each month, but it's really not a specification like you would have in manufacturing. So what I'm looking at now on the y-axis on the probability plot on the right-hand side is the 10, 50, and 90 values. Those are percentage. Now notice 90 minus 10 is 80. In other words, between those 2 values on the x-axis, that would be 80% of the population. So as I mentioned, I like to put statements at the bottom of the chart that describe how we're performing. So we say the process is predictable, and the estimated median profit margin is 9.9, with 80% of the month, that's 4 out of 5 months, between 8.6 to 11.2. So everybody's got an idea of the variability of our process. Now we can assign the colors to this, as we did here. We can say it's red up in the upper left-hand corner there. Now notice we can also put comments at the bottom. Notice in this particular case it declined. So what I'd like to do is try to better understand why it declined. So I'm going to go back to our overall value chain. So let's look at voice of the customer. I'll click on that. Again, I got my process for capturing voice of the customer. And I got also various metrics of the quality, cost, and time for voice of the customer. So if I got a link on the right-hand side, that means I got data for this particular metric, and I can click on it. Now, it's green right now because we haven't decided we're going to be working on it or not. Oh, But if you notice here, our dissatisfaction went up. Well, that's not good. Now, if we look at the comments in the bottom there, we notice that the feedback indicates customers have not been pleased for primarily 3 reasons: room cleanliness, unfriendly staff, and a lot of time waiting. Kind of a clue. Let's keep that in mind. Now notice this one doesn't have a probability plot because it's attribute data. You know, and the books in our classes and everything get into all the details of that. But even this is an attribute, we're still looking at an individual chart, not a feature. So let's go back again here. When I look at sales and marketing. Okay, let's look under market share. So market share is coming along. It's got ups and downs. Oops, drop. That's not good news. Again, we're describing here, this is the value that we're at the bottom of the chart. The estimated median is 52.5. But if we look under comments, we notice that another hospital moved into town. Another clue. See, what we're doing basically is step number 3 of the overall 9-step system. We're analyzing. This is one form of analyzing. Now, we're not getting a lot of details on it, but hopefully you get the idea. Let's look at delivered clinical services. Okay, we've got 2 metrics over here. Let's look at length of stay. Okay, now this one looks a little different. It's got 2 charts. Again, this is 30,000. We're looking at the average and the standard deviation to see if it's stable. We do a probability plot of the raw data. Saying now it looks like our median is a certain value there, and 80% of occurrence is between 149 and 375. But notice how the length of stay didn't change. So far as what we're looking at right now, it's something that we ought not be working on, at least from this point of view, for profit margins. So let's go back again. Let's look at weekly errors. That's something else we could look at. Looks like our weekly errors went down. Well, that's good news. So I don't know if maybe it should be getting lower, but at least for what we're talking about relative profit margins, we don't see how there's maybe a correlation of droppage of the profit margins make a difference on this one here. So from this point of view of improving profit margins, I don't think we ought to be working on this one. Let's go back again to our value chain. Let's look at housekeeping now. What about cleaning quality? Uh-oh, our cleaning quality went down. Well, that's not good. If we look at the comments, we'll notice here that we outsourced it. Well, maybe that wasn't such a hot idea, or at least we didn't implement it very well. Get another clue. Kind of like a murder mystery. Who done it? So let's look at patient transportation now. Okay, diagnosis to bedtime. Oh, went down. Well, that's pretty good. Oh, look, we got on the right-hand chart there, we got criteria of 30 minutes or less. Oops, only 7% of the time we're meeting that criteria. That means 93% of the time we're not meeting that, which is stated at the bottom of the chart. So that's something that maybe we need to work on. It's not giving us our goal. It didn't change relative to recent time, at least not to the getting worse, but maybe that's something we ought to be working on. Okay, let's go now to look at this enterprise process management. Now, if you notice the roadmap I have at the top, is basically that 9-step roadmap. So we start out with the value chain. We basically analyzed it. Now what we want to do is create smart satellite level metric goals. We want to create strategies, look at number 6, high potential improvement areas, then establish goals for that and identify projects. So let's look at doing that. So what I've got at the top basically is the titles is business goals, strategies, high potential areas, and projects. So that fundamentally is step number 4, that's goal. Strategies is step 5. 6 is high potential areas, and then projects is step 7. So it seemed like a reasonable goal would be to move the profit margins up to where they were previously. And we're going to say we're going to do that in 14 months. Now the question is, how are you going to do that? It's easy to say it, but it's another thing to do it. So what we're going to look at doing that is by increasing the monthly revenue. That's the top line. We're going to do that. Well, our potential area is going to get marketing. There's going to be an owner of this, the marketing manager. What we want to do now is track the market share to be a monthly median of 56% in 14 months. Basically get us back where we want. And notice with this farmer reporting that every month the marketing manager is going to report to their boss on how they're doing. So with this system, their boss is not going to be saying, well, what happened this particular month? But I want to see this trend actually pop up there and stay up there. So the tendency will be to ask the status of the projects. Now the other thing that we have is we got some customer improvements that are customer surveys indicated that we had some issues, waiting, cleanliness, and so on. And our data kind of supported that conclusion. So in this case here, we're looking at improving the housekeeping and patient transportation. Again, there's going to be an owner of that particular metric. We want to get the housekeeping back to where it was at. So the manager is not going to be asking what they're going to be doing, create a new process or adjust their process so they meet the numbers. The other thing is patient transportation. How can we go in and have it so people are not waiting as much? Because that was kind of consistent with what was basically said in the survey. And again, there's a manager of that, and they're going to be asking for the timely completion of their project. Okay, so what we've basically done is analyze the overall process, and then we got to the projects that we think were beneficial to the business as a whole. So what we've talked about so far is describe issues with the current process improvement efforts, create predictive scorecards, and then how you could put together this overall business system. Now, one of the comments, or the comments of general, the theme of comments, I should say, that I got from inputs that you gave me before when signing up for the webinar, and also other public presentations that I give this to, is, Forrest, this really makes sense. But then how do I convince other people in the organization? Because maybe this is outside of my realm of responsibility. Well, one thing I would suggest here, which one it is, that's going to be the last one, of course, is looking at our website. I put together some things in here that can actually help you describe this overall system to other people. So one of the things is you can click on the business system here. And hopefully that graphic kind of describes how we're actually doing here. So what I believe this integrated enterprise excellence system that's shown to the right is a collection and the compiling of a lot of different methodologies that come together here. Now what you can do is scan through that, and you'll see the overall roadmap. And also we talk about how you could deploy it. There's various different options for deploying it. Like what do you do and so on. Also talked about scorecards. And what you could do with scorecards here. And I got different things on the balance score, objectives, the metrics here. Click on that one. I got basically a value chain here and how you could start drilling down to that. And how you can go in and look at actually the scorecard metrics. See how you can do that. So people might find that kind of information to be beneficial. Now another thing I got in here, if one were clicking on this, bottom here, notice here I've got various videos, like the video here, YIE, how IEE. Also we got a case study. Also I described this, a lot of these techniques in the overall business system here. You can compare IEE by looking at this table to other methodologies. Another thing you might find to be beneficial when describing it to others is how these techniques align with other concepts like Deming's 14 points, or total quality management, or BPM. So I put together those particular segments or description or articles that kind of describe this. If you click on software here, you'll find a description of what we could, this EPRS software, which we really basically describe. You go in and look at the, we got also, there's a client piece where we're going in and creating these particular charts using Minitab that you get. This sits on the server. And we've got various tabs up at the top, such as scorecarding, why this EPRS and so on, EPRS system and so on. So I wanted to kind of share that with you to so that could maybe help you describe these techniques to others in your organization. Okay, so this is getting close to the end here. It's kind of a special offer here that if this kind of makes sense to you, basically I get into volume 3 of the book series here, describes this 30,000 foot level part of reporting, and volume 2 describes basically building the overall system. And if you go to our site and it's interested, then you can go in and click and get a coupon code, and you get 50% off of the purchase of the collection of the 5 books. So, time for questions. Any questions that somebody might have?
Well, Forrest, I have one for you.
Okay.
I understood you were talking at the Arvada ASQ conference a little bit ago. How did people take to the red, yellow, green discussion? Because I know companies I've worked for have really liked that because the managers just like green to go and red to yell at somebody.
Well, I think that's a general consensus with various conferences I get into. It's their manager seems to like it, but they don't seem to like it very well, or they think it doesn't lead the right behaviors throughout the organization. Because a lot of times with the goals that are set or somewhat arbitrary, and it's often what happens is we're just tackling common cause variability as those special cause. I remember one time I was giving this presentation, and someone in the audience said, well, I got a situation, Forrest. They said, I had a particular metric, and it was red, and so I was supposed to be working on it. I didn't do anything, but then it changed to green. So what should I have done? I said, well, obviously, you take credit for it. Well, kind of joking there a little bit, but keep working on it because it's going to be red again. And so, but that's what happens a lot of times. And I think a lot of the people that are down in the trenches don't necessarily like them, but it's often very appealing. But I think one of the things that I found to be beneficial to describing these techniques to others, because I've basically shown you the whole enchilada, here, but you don't have to use the whole enchilada. You can just take one set of metrics and start looking at the data differently. And that can really make a big difference in the organization, and maybe gradually start changing it over in time. A lot of people ask for, I try to go in and address some of the questions that were covered or issues that they thought they might have. Selection of the right KPIs with the right target, and make sure they're followed by process experts. Well, hopefully that was addressed, or at least I attempted to address that, and if there's any other questions along the way, just jump on in here. Also, somebody talked about just getting started. I think it's a very good point. I've had some people go in and say, well, we're not quite ready for this. We're going to maybe a couple years. I said, well, it's better just to go ahead and get started now, because if we don't, then the thing is we're going to be having basically the same conversation 2 years from now. And what I'm suggesting a good place to start, and I describe it on the website, is looking at the high-level value chain, what you actually do and how you measure what you do. And then, even though it's not perfect, and maybe you don't have automatic data collection, and maybe the data is not out there at all for some of the metrics, then get started on that and start leading to the right kind of behaviors. So that's another point. Let's see, we got another one here. Convincing management why we should do something differently when corporates use scorecards to evaluate plans. Well, I was working in one organization in the pharmaceutical. They made IV bags, and they were having a question about safety. It was coming down from corporate that they need improved safety. Well, that can be quite a challenge. It's easy to say we need improved safety. It's another thing to actually improve safety, so we have less accidents. You can do certain things, so we got the guards and we got the rubber mats and so on. But I can still remember one of the general manager was pointing out, and he says, what we really have is a break time, and then all of a sudden somebody starts running where, we got a lot of water around here, and then they slip and they hurt themselves. We've got a bunch of people that are not very they're careless. And so you went in and just pointed out one potential improvement is maybe with your HR policy you have a month evaluation. If the person looks like they're in an accident waiting to happen, you say, well, it doesn't look like you're going to fit in this organization. That might be something that would work for you, rather than just trying to go in and make a change. And then also, when we started presenting information, because I got some unique ways of presenting like safety incidents, then you could go in and present that to corporate or whoever else is giving the metrics, saying, this is up and down variability, and we liked improvement, but we did this and this and this, and it's going to cost us $10 million to actually do it. Is this where we ought to be focusing our efforts? And then you can make the decision using a little bit of a logic and analytics along the way. See if we got any other points here. We have always done it this way. Why do we need to change? That's another one that we often get confronted with. And what I'm suggesting is that we start just maybe looking at data differently. And we also have this one book, or this professor from the University of Texas. He gives a 4-hour session, our Master Black Belt session, for I'll call it an advocacy selling. He talks about a situation where the mouse, for computer mouse, and where was it invented? Well, it was invented by Xerox. How much money did Xerox get from the mouse? Well, nothing. Don't you think that management would have liked to gotten something? Well, yes. Who does he blame it on? He blames it on the engineers, that they were not able to convince the management to actually go in and make the change or consider it the technology of value. So the question is, if there's certain things that look valuable to you or make sense to you if you're running the show, then hopefully some of the points that we put on the website can be beneficial to you. Is there any more questions? No more questions. Well, enjoyed working with you guys on this presentation here. Once you exit the webinar, a survey will appear, and I'm going to appreciate your feedback on that. And until next time, have a good one.